All right, everyone. I watched Cobra Kai season 5, so let's talk about it. First of all, I have to say season 4 did a really good job, setting up season 5. After, we saw Cobra Kai win the All Valley tournament, Kreese getting framed, Miguel leaving home to find his father, and then, Daniel teaming up with Chosen to take down Silver. So I really, feel like, season 4 did a good job, setting up season 5, and it also that way created a hype for season 5. And I won't lie, I was also very hyped. The real question was, how good was season 5? How did it turn out to be, and was it really worth the hype? So that's what this video is about. We're going to talk about it, but first thing first, I will say that actually I would say it did live up to his hype, and it was actually a pretty good season. It worked quite well for me, at least. And I also say that it was actually one of the best seasons. However, I just have to say that maybe I just wanted to just like bring it up just like that. I still try to go and prepare that it might not actually that be that good, just because I knew that because they had created so much hype. I just knew that if I get like too hyped for it, and then all of a sudden what if the show season doesn't meet the hype, or like doesn't live up to its hype, then what happens? Of course, I'll be disappointed. So I just knew that I had to be prepared for that. So I tried not to get as hyped as I was maybe expected to be. So I just wanted to bring that up. Nonetheless, I would still say that it was a pretty good season, probably because I didn't get too hyped for it. That's why I enjoyed it. And I'll also say that it was one of the best seasons. Although, was it the best season? Well, that's what we're going to find out. So let us talk about it. Let's first start with the man himself, Terry Silver. Of course, he was probably like the biggest part of this season, and this he was also what really made the season very exciting to watch. Terry Silver, and let's actually talk about him, because first thing first, I have to say, ever since season 4, we were all like, I'm pretty sure we were all excited to see him come back, and that too this time he was much bigger and better than he was like in the Karate Kid 3 movie, if I remember correctly. Because first of all, now that he has the opportunity to open dojos all over the valley, which he couldn't back in Karate Kid 3. Now he was able to really just basically just put himself out there for the audience to watch. And that's what he did. And this time also, I would certainly say he was also like much smarter than he was before, and much more like interesting to watch, because I feel like he was crazy. He was still crazy as usual, but he was certainly more sane. Like, he was like, acting like, properly, like less cartoonish, less kiddish, if that makes sense. And we could clearly see that with the, like the way he would deal with people such as, Daniel, Mike Barnes. Well, maybe not that much of Mike Barnes, but yeah, definitely Daniel and Chosen as well, which I'm also going to come back to a bit later. And of course, he also, ended up fighting them, which I'm going to talk about in a while. But let's get back to Silver first. I want to talk a little bit more about him. I have to say that, like, of course, now that he had several doses over the valley, it would make sense for him to, hire senseis to teach, several senseis to teach at all his dojos, because, he couldn't teach alone. And honestly, I'm glad that they did that, because honestly speaking, as great of a character and a fighter he is, I personally never saw him as a sensei. In fact, I would say, Kreese is a better sensei than Silver, even though Silver might be a better character, a more interesting character, and a better fighter than Kreese. Kreese has been the better sensei, and honestly, he has been the real sensei of Cobra Kai. Whereas, Silver was like, sort of like a co-founder, who funded for the dojo. It was Kreese, who like started the dojo, and, he was the one, who was more focused on the teaching. Silver, he had always cared about like business side. That's why we could clearly see how he really had like really improved, upgraded the dojo with several different kind of training equipments, merchandises, like the snack, drinks, shirts, all that kind of stuff. So Silver has always like focused on on the money more than the teachings. So I wanted to bring that up. But I have to say that one scene was that kind of stood out to me, where Silver was actually teaching something, and someone as well was Kenny Payne, because we kind of saw that in season 4 also, how he was like teaching him. And this season they continue that. I think I just, as much as I liked seeing him mentor Kenny Payne, I could clearly see him like brainwashing Kenny Payne into becoming someone he wasn't, teaching him the silver bullet move, and teaching him how to be a leader, which Kenny Payne really needed to learn, which is good for Kenny Payne. But at the same time, it was also a bit dangerous for him, because it was clear that he was like just I guess if this makes sense, he was sort of slithering into his head and trying to just get into his head and once again like just brainwash him. So that was clearly visible. But nonetheless, I just really liked to see Silver just operate Cobra Kai at a higher budget, and definitely see him just deal with other characters. So there was that. And I just have to say, like just the way, he gets around things by paying his way through. I mean, it is very unethical and immoral, but I just, I guess that's like the true character of Terry Silver. There's like no getting around that. That's how he has always been. Just tries to like, like basically take the easy path, if that makes sense. Like the most, easy and not necessarily most ethical path. So that has always been Silver in a nutshell. Even then, I have to say maybe it's just the way Thomas Ian Griffith like acted out Terry Silver. I think that's what like really made his character appealing to the audience, if I'm not wrong, because something about his acting that really just makes his character stand out. So I think that's really why like Terry Silver is such an interesting character, despite how immoral and unethical he might be. Now, I do want to briefly touch upon Mike Barnes, given that he was in the season as well, and wanted to just talk about the fact that like they did the right thing by moving on uh, from Mike Barnes' relationship with Terry Silver, because honestly, I don't think it was worth showing that when they could be showing much better things. And what we saw instead was Terry Silver working with several other senseis, rather than hiring someone like Mike Barnes to like make, I don't know, like just to like get make him rich, I guess. If I remember, at least that was like the idea back in Karate Kid 3, but this time he tries to get things done differently, and I'm glad they did that, because honestly, I don't think it was necessary to see Mike Barnes work with Terry Silver again. And on top of that, I'm also glad that they got over the rivalry between Daniel LaRusse and Mike Barnes, because even I don't think that was also very necessary to be seen, because his rivalry with Barnes was nothing like his rivalry with Lawrence. His rivalry with Lawrence is much more fun to watch. So there's that. Now, I do have to, just briefly touch upon their relationship though, and I wanted to like compare Terry Silver and Mike Barnes' relationship with John Kreese and Johnny Lawrence's relationship. So at least from where I see it is like Terry Silver's relationship with Mike Barnes is like the business sort of relationship. It is like a business relationship, at least back in Karate Kid 3. Whereas when you look at John Kreese and Johnny Lawrence, their relationship was like a student sensei and student relationship, which is why, if it makes sense, I would say it does hit home more than like watching Terry Silver and Mike Barnes on screen together. And that's also why I feel like it's worth showing John Kreese along with Johnny Lawrence on screen more than like Mike Barnes and Terry Silver, because I just feel like their relationship certainly hits home more. And I won't lie. Obviously, it's like not to say that their relationship is stable either. I mean, Johnny Lawrence has issues with John Kreese, especially because of the way he mentored him, and that's fair. Nonetheless, it's still like just great to be able to see like Kreese trying his best to care, even though he might not always like succeed in it. And of course, Kreese isn't all like always like all that good all the time. But again, like I said, like one side you have Johnny Lawrence, completely against Kreese for what he did in past, but you have Kreese, trying to care about Johnny Lawrence. So I mean, as stable or unstable the relationship might be, and the fact is, it's still worth watching or worth seeing on screen. So that's what I wanted to mention. Now, let's move on to the next topic. Now, let's move away from Silver for a while, and now let's talk about Miguel leaving for Mexico. Honestly, during the end of season 4, when they actually show him leaving home to find his father in Mexico, honestly, I was quite excited for that. And I really was excited to see him find his father, and how, like he finds out the truth behind his father and why his mother left him in the first place. And honestly, I think it completely worked. I really liked that scene, or it wasn't exactly scene. It happened for quite a while during the beginning of the season, where he's just wandering around Mexico and finally meets his father. And then from that point, when he meets his father, to the point when he finds out the truth behind his father, I think it was a pretty engaging like part of the show or the season to watch. And honestly speaking, I wouldn't have had any problem if they like spent a little bit more time of showing Miguel with his father. But honestly, I feel like the reason was clear enough. So it was for a better they moved on as soon as possible, as long as it was clear for us. of why, his mother left his father in the first place. Now, speaking of Miguel, I did have to also talk about another scene with Miguel in it, and you probably can guess, which scene it was. And that was a fight scene between Miguel and Robbie, because this was the last fight scene we were ever going to have between Miguel and Robbie, and it was a perfect fight scene, mainly because, it certainly, helped redeem their relationship, and not only just that, but I think I kind of knew that, like they were going to like have many callbacks from the final fight scene from season two, where Robbie pushes, or not pushes, but kicks Miguel off the cliff. This time, Miguel, who was in Robbie's place, who could have, pushed him off the cliff, but he held back, showed mercy. And I think that's when, Miguel also explains why he joined karate in the first place. That was not to, which is not to hurt others. So while that fight scene, like, redeemed their friendship, like Robbie's and Miguel's, at the same time also it also gave a clear reason why, like Miguel even joined karate in the first place, so it made it clear for us. So it was a really great scene to watch, and that way, we don't have to see, Miguel and Robbie quarrel again, now that, they both can get along quite well now. So that was a great scene. Speaking of fight scenes, it's time to talk about Daniel and Chosen, along with Johnny Lawrence and Mike Barnes. Now, of course, I have to first say that I honestly liked how, Daniel and Chosen were getting along with each other, despite being enemies in the past. Now that, they have to, work together to take down a bigger foe, which is Terry Silver. This, of course, meant that we were also going to see Chosen fight against Terry Silver, and also Daniel also fight against Terry Silver, and that too twice, which I'm going to like talk about in a while. But before that, I had to first mention that, that scene where, Mike Barnes, Johnny Lawrence, and Chosen team up together to, break into Terry Silver's house to take him down. Honestly, I really like that scene, mainly because, I just noticed how, all three of Daniel's foe from the Karate Kid movies work together to take down his biggest foe, that is Terry Silver. So I just, just noticed that. So I just wanted to like, mention that. Now it is time to talk about those fight scenes. First, let us talk about the fight scene with Daniel and Terry at Stingray's house, which was their first fight. And honestly speaking, we kind of knew who was going to win, who was going to lose. Of course, Terry Silver was going to be the one to win. I'm pretty sure many of us thought that. So I don't think I can be wrong with that. But it was still, worth the watch. It was still like, worth watching that fight scene, just mainly because it was still a pretty good fight scene, like despite, we who was going to win. But then I have to say though, like the way, like Terry Silver just, sneaked up behind Daniel from the dark. I was just like, oh, better watch out, Danny boy. And then honestly speaking, it was a great fight scene to watch, but and even though like Daniel lost, I'm just like glad to see him like getting back at him in the second fight scene, which I'm gonna come to in a while. But first, let us talk about Chosen versus Terry Silver. And honestly, this was like probably the most awaited fight scene of season five ever since season four, because these two are like probably like the most powerful fighters in the entire series. And honestly speaking, it was a pretty good fight scene. It was really an exciting fight scene to watch. And honestly speaking, we did like clearly see like Chosen getting the upper hand, which is why Terry Silver had to start using weapons, which was his sword, and Chosen also using like his daggers, if that's the right word to use. But they started using weapons, and honestly speaking, we all can agree that that was supposed to be Chosen's win. If it weren't for Silver catching him, like well, it wasn't off guard, because he basically just slid his back from behind, because this Chosen kind of got distracted. But then, theoretically speaking, that should have been Chosen's win. We kind of knew that. Terry Silver could have been killed, could have been like stabbed with Chosen, given that he was right there to just stab him if he would have liked to. Now let's move on to the second fight scene between Daniel and Terry, and this was even the final fight scene of the entire season. And honestly speaking, we knew. I mean, sorry, no, we knew. Sorry about saying that on so many times. I do have to say that like even though Daniel won, I just liked how he, despite not like really like using the fight moves he learned from Miyagi-Do, because honestly speaking, he was using the fight scenes that the fight moves Terry taught him when he was training back in Karate Kid 3. And that was like the Quicksilver technique, if that's the right technique, or if that was the right name for it. And that way I just liked just seeing how he just gave Terry Silver a taste of his own medicine, which was quite a satisfying watch. And that way like Daniel also really basically Daniel was able to take him down by giving him a taste of his own medicine. And I just also wanted to say that I really thought that was probably his only way of taking him down, because I couldn't really imagine like Daniel like uh, being able to like use any other like moves against Terry Silver to take him down. I felt like that was like the smartest idea, despite whether Daniel ever liked those moves Terry Silver taught him or not. Now to wrap it up, let's talk about a very final scene of season five, where Silver gets arrested for assaulting Stingray and Kreese gets out of prison, which means that, now that the original Sensei is back, I'm pretty sure, like Cobra Kai is still going to continue. But now the real question is, because now that everyone left Cobra Kai after, finding out the truth behind the last tournament, who's actually going to be there to, learn from Kreese, even if, Kreese does, like continue to be the sensei instead of Silver this time. So that's really, a huge question mark. Nonetheless, we did still see, like both Miyagi-Do and, Cobra Kai, qualify for the Sekai Taikai during the latter half of the season. So, there's still something, like uh, something to, like continue or like, take further in season six, to which is to show us like Cobra Kai and Miyagi Do actually compete against each other in the Sekai Taikai, which could be possibly shown in season six. Although we just don't know like who's actually going to be there in Cobra Kai now that everyone left. Now I do have to like also touch upon the way Kreese gets out of prison and how they they play Frank Sinatra's "My Way" in the background, because he truly got out his own way using his own like technique, his own strategy, using that was like using the help of one of his prison inmates. So there's that. Now speaking of Kreese, I did want to like briefly touch upon this one particular scene with Kreese, even though there might not have been much of him in this season. I think that scene was a very beautiful and a perfect scene for a character like Kreese, which was a therapy scene, where Kreese basically expresses himself to all the characters he has come across in his life, and that way he's also like expressing himself to us as the audience, which was scene which was worth watching for that reason. And those characters are like Johnny Lawrence, young Johnny Lawrence, his captain, the love of his life, and Terry Silver. At least these are like most of the characters. There's also Tori, and then his own younger version he talks to in the therapy. So it was a great scene. And I think one particular like dialogue that caught my attention was where he says that he wanted his students to be better than him, and that way it makes it more understandable why he kept going hard on his students, whether it be back in Karate Kid with Johnny Lawrence, or even in Cobra Kai with all his Cobra Kai students, such as Tori, for example. He would go hard on her, so it makes it quite understandable. Now, overall, I do have to say this season was a great season. I totally liked it, enjoyed it. In fact, I will also say that it sure is one of the best seasons of Cobra Kai. Now, honestly though, I still have to say season four and season one were still better, mainly because I got to learn more from these two seasons. More in the sense that I got to learn more life lessons, which Cobra Kai has been great at teaching, teaching life lessons, which Cobra Kai is known for, at least in my opinion, at least from my perspective. Nonetheless, I do have to say that season five, despite like being more visually stunning and built, certainly being made at a higher budget, at least that's something we can agree on. I do have to say it wasn't the best for me, but it sure was one of the strongest, along with season four and season one. Finally, I do have to say that season six is really worth the wait, or sorry, it's certainly going to be worth the watch, at least in my opinion. I just hope that they do have a season six, which will probably be the final season of Cobra Kai. So that's all I had to say for this video, and thank you for watching.